So this is part 2 of the rise of Black communities in tech. So 4 weeks ago, we hosted part 1, right at the peak of the BLM movement. We spoke about a lot of tragedy, a lot of trauma, a lot of pain that had happened. But on the session, we gathered some amazing and incredible Black leaders to talk about how do we move from a position of strength, a position of power and unity. So much has happened. We've seen hashtags, protests, D&I workshops, Black Pound Day, but still they haven't arrested Breonna Taylor's cops. We are still talking about awareness and not action. And on this session today, we have gathered, again, some amazing, incredible community leaders who are going to share what they've seen work well, what needs to be done, and what the future looks like. So the hashtag for today is Black Tech Communities. We're going to have fire gems on this call. So please do tweet away, Instagram, Snapchat if you're still using, TikTok, you name it, so that other people are aware about the knowledge and can move from action. Our Twitter handle is This Is YSYS and hashtag Black Tech Communities. So before we get started, on the last session we had meditation, and today we are lucky to have the amazing Lindani do some poetry for us. So I'm going to allow him to introduce himself and to set the scene. And if everyone goes on mute, and we can take it from there.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much, Deborah, for that introduction. Unfortunately, I didn't make the last meeting, but we spoke and you gave me an insight of what an amazing meeting it was. So my name is Lindani. I do poetry. I don't call myself a poet. There are many reasons for that. I think that as a people, the world has tried to put us in a box so many times that I don't want to put myself in another box. I believe that I am beyond a title. I'm beyond, or we are beyond the title of BAME or ethnicity or, you know, the minority and all of those concepts that are there and designed to identify a problem, but at the same time, psychologically putting me back in this box. So I actively free myself and give myself the psychological therapy of not putting myself in those boxes. So bear with me with that idea. But before I actually go on to the poem, I just want to touch on what the poem is about. I think for me is, Deborah, you touched on this and the importance of us moving from a place of strength. You know, I was listening to Toni Morrison's, and she was talking about the intention of racism or a racist system is to get you caught up and distracted. That is the most serious function of racism in itself, is to get you distracted. But what I want to say is that we are focused, and when it comes to the issue of diversity or inclusion, we are speaking from a place of completeness. We understand that we are complete. We understand that the world needs us. The world has always been in need of the African race, and is going to continue to need what we bring into the table, or what we bring to the table. So when we're having these discussions of inclusion, this discussion of the need to invest in African or Black businesses, it comes from a place of completeness. And I want to share that understanding, and I hope we all share that understanding. We're not having this discussion, or I'm not doing this poem because I'm trying to beg to fit in. I've already been in. It's a matter of the world giving me an opportunity and giving people that look like me an opportunity to share their genius. So the poem in itself is actually called Completeness. It was a very, very short poem that I wrote yesterday because I felt that, you know, there's no need to come back with the same news. You know, it's time that I put something new. So I just took the time to put something quickly together. I hope you enjoy it, but most importantly, I hope you get the message out of it, that we are complete. There's nothing missing. If anything, the wall is missing out on our completeness, but it's not the other way around. So bear with me. Let me get to this Word document, but thank you. Let me sip my water. So Deborah, I just want to say that they shut the door, but we built gates. With rejuvenation in colors, you already guessed it. Melanin across all edges, royalty in its finest, systematic racism on autopilot, a knee on the rear seat, like a needle thirsting for new blood, like a biased George found under a rug. It pierced deep, yeah, it pierced deep. But the spirits of a warrior is unweakened. The forest is still alive even when it loses a tree. You see, now we grow. We've been the glow. like shooting stars in the tech space. They gave us shoes without a lace, but we are self-resource. Tree roots became our strengths of fate, creating inventively. Mentally, our energies never needed a charge, but you see, the need gave us more charge. We can't let loose. More reasons to boost policies, ride horses through hidden fences, weaken the systems designed to curse us with a knee. Hey, listen, you see, I had a conversation with a table. It said to me, there's something missing, a voice, a creative genius, awaiting to gift us with its blessings, a genius not in wanting of pity or favors. They are the masterpiece, building pyramids with little air to breathe. The movement is a storm. Yes, the movement is a storm dating back to centuries. The hashtags are rain drizzles reflecting a deeper song. If you sing it, sing the lyrics. Please sing the lyrics. Don't lip sync your fingers into a pool if you're afraid to swim in it. But we are complete. We are complete. Thank you so much, guys. That is the poem. Hopefully that touches deep. And like I say again, guys, we're complete. I just want to thank all of you here on this panel, adding on to this completeness of who we are and all the stuff you're doing. It means so much. Like I'm catching up with the tech space, but please keep doing, keep inspiring, keep transforming, keep reviving. We are colors and we are so complete. But thank you so much for having me. I'll listen to you guys now. Thank you.
That was incredible. Wow. The storm is moving. I don't think anyone's ever said my name and Bill Gates in a sentence together, so I receive it. That's absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Cool. Before we move on to the panel, just want to remind a few people, at YSYS, at the peak of Black Lives Matter movement, we launched an amazing community called YSYS Community Advocates for individuals, allies, founders, investors that want to be part of a community that's really campaigning for inclusion, equality, and justice within the tech ecosystem. Many of the individuals that are on this panel today are part of that community that really are leading the way and flying the flag when it comes to those initiatives and those policies and those campaign making. So if you haven't already become a member, I do encourage you to. Also not going to force you to. This is for people that want to be part of the mission, want to open doors, like Landy said, and do more. But yeah, that's the link, and you can also head over to our website and we have it quite visible on the top of the tab where it says YSYS Advocates. But that's enough from me. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we are going to our awesome panel. Welcome.
Hi.
Thank you for having us.
Excited. So should we jump straight into intros? I'm going to call your name out and take it from there. Please introduce yourself and your organization. Abadesi.
Hey everybody, Abadesi here, founder and CEO of Hustle Crew, also one half of Techish Podcast. Since 2016, we've been using talks and training about bias, structural oppression, and privilege to make tech more inclusive. I'm also a YSYS advocate. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Andy?
Hey everyone, thanks for having me. Firstly, excited to be doing this. I watched the first one, just super inspired by a bunch of people I admire every single day. So hi, I'm Andy Davis, angel investor and founder of something called 10x10, a group of Black founders and investors in the UK, and recently started something, a 10x10 fund to invest, a pre-seed fund to invest in Black founders.
Awesome. Anu?
Hi, I'm Anu. I work for an organisation called British Patient Capital. So we are an investor into venture capital funds, which obviously then go on to invest in companies, and kind of been in the industry for 8 years now. I've been involved in a lot of diversity-related things, from working with BVCA, helping them to found their minorities in PMVC stream, but also work with a bunch of international LPs in an organisation called ILPA, and I'm on their D&I committee as well.
Awesome. Mohammed?
Hi, my name is Mohammed Kazam. I'm the founder of Nomi. Nomi is the app that will help you spend with more purpose. And what we mean with that is provide you actionable insights that you can then turn your spend more intentional. And when we talk about intentional spend, that naturally falls into saving and there'll be features where you can save using machine learning and manual techniques. And then the biggest part, I think, lies a core normally is the community spend, where you will be able to track your spend against key community spend areas. So that could be Black-owned, local spends, how much you're spending in a certain radius, or stuff like board diversity or eco-fashion. And I'm also an advocate of YSYS.
Love it. Rich.
Hey crew. My name's Rich Soen-Georgi. I'm the founder and CEO of Business Score. It's a platform that works with some of the most exciting online businesses and matches them with different growth funding options. We did a program called Y Combinator out in the States last year. Currently hiring, looking for super smart people, so feel free to hit us up if you're currently looking for a role. We're also an advocate of YSYS and, massive fans of the journey that YSYS has been on. And, really excited to be here today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rich. And Tom.
Hi, my name's Tom Adiula. I'm a tech entrepreneur. I've been in startups since 1998. And for 11 years, I was running my own tech startup in the fashion space called Metail, which I sold last summer. Since then, I've been focused on positive climate and society-related projects, and recently co-founded Extend Ventures, which is Black-led and Black-focused around diversifying access to finance. So we're looking to do a big project which we kicked off looking at Black and ethnic minority businesses and understanding the performance of those businesses across the last 10 years. Consequently, I've been doing lots of lobbying into government in order to try and take this moment to sort of drive real systemic change.
Fantastic. We are really in the presence of so much greatness right now. Absolutely inspired by all of the work that all of you are doing. If everyone that's tuned in today also is inspired, so please give us the clap hands, the emojis. I want to see so many emojis and fire flames going through. So please do engage. Cool. So my first question is really, like, so much has happened, like I said, in the past 4 weeks. A lot of inspirational things from people leading the movement, from calling out their employees. You've had from influencers really standing by their values and not doing work or work with organizations that are being silent. I would love for a few of you on the call to share, what kind of moment has really been inspirational to you in the peak of BLM. Feel free.
I'm happy to take that. I think for looking at like the business communities and particularly around Black-owned businesses, I think for someone like myself, I've drawn a lot of inspiration for organizations like YSYS that give us an opportunity to connect with people. But I think in the context of Black Lives Matter and what we've seen the last few weeks, I think a lot of smaller Black businesses have discovered that there's loads of other people that have small Black businesses. And I can see, like, within Facebook groups and within different communities, them just collaborating with each other, making logos for each other, just sharing expertise. And I think that has really been accelerated by this whole thing, and that's been really inspiring.
I think for me, the really sort of interesting thing I feel that's happened over the last few weeks is it seems to have opened up a space to be able to have the conversation about race in a way which isn't, oh, I'm not racist, as in that binary sense of like you're either racist or you're not. So actually talking about behaviors and talking about structures and talking about unconscious biases, being able to have these conversations with people and organizations in a way that they've just steered clear from that previously. And it's been sort of fascinating to see how businesses have suddenly sort of like, it's almost like they've just woken up and the world is different, and these things were happening and they had no idea, and these stories have been rising up, and it's felt like people have felt comfortable having conversations that they could never have had before.
Yeah, I'll go next. I think I probably echo like comments from Tom and Mohammed. I think probably the most inspirational thing has been Black Pound Day, easily. We work with a lot of online businesses, and just seeing how their sales been going through the roof as a result of the focus on Black business has been, really inspirational. And as you know, Black business owners often face a lot of prejudice when it comes to trying to access finance, or when it comes to, finding the knowledge you need in order to to launch different aspects of your business. And so that's been brilliant. And I think it's something that we all need to not only kind of do on Twitter, but we also need to, like, you know, support Black businesses when it comes to, you know, what things we buy in terms of food, when it comes to, you know, buying presents. There's a lot of really cool Black owned trainer companies, for example. And I think it's just important for us to, like, spend more time looking out for how we can support the Black community. We think is important to us, not just on Twitter, but also with our wallet and actually put into action.
Yeah, I love what Rich said there about Black Pound Day. It's very difficult for me to pick one moment, Deborah, but I feel like there's a collection of moments where incredible Black entrepreneurs and tech professionals I know are being recognized in a way they should have been a long time ago. I feel like all throughout June, it's suddenly like reporters woke up and noticed Black people and decided to start giving us attention. I hope that it continues, but it was just amazing seeing, you know, folks like you, YSYS, Kike Onuende, BYP, lists like all these people who've been hustling and doing that hard work for years, finally getting on the list they should have been for a time, finally getting the press that they should have been for a while. Like, I just for once felt like headlines were representing the reality that I see, and that was very refreshing.
I think for me, what has been probably my highlight is it's not just the conversations happening, but it's the fact that as Black people, we've been able to, for the first time for many of us, really open up and really, like, address a lot of the things that we felt, and really, like, not be afraid to point our Blackness out, you know, to the world, basically, and to our organizations, and to, you know, we've just been very free with that. And I've seen a lot of kind of like people for the first time realizing a lot of things that they've carried and a lot of things that they've just ignored or buried, and just being able to bring them out and have open and honest conversations with each other, and to be able to support each other as we like expose some of those things. Like, that to me has been like amazing. Like, there's been so much that I think all of us could say that we just have never talked about. Like, I'd never talked about stuff with you and my family, you know, let alone colleagues, let alone other people in the industry. But seeing us all be able to just be very, like, open now and free, and, like, not be afraid to upset anyone or make someone uncomfortable, like, that to me has just been amazing. That kind of release has just been great.
And for, I think for me, I think it's just great to see that we finally mean it as a collective, right? Like, all the decisions we make, big and small now, this isn't a temporary thing. This isn't a phase. We're here forever now, I think. Hopefully, as a people, as a collective, if it's Black Pound Day, it's like, the questions always asked, actually, it's Black first. It's like, where should I spend my time? Where should I spend my coins? Like, who should I consider first? It's again, the openness is really important, because now there's, as Tom mentioned, there's this openness around the conversation around race and whether or not you're racist and how you deal with that. It's okay when that validation is no longer required, right? And that's finally okay for everyone. So now you can go in and you can be yourself, and that means recognizing that we're more than enough. So we're just gonna be amongst ourselves, and that's okay. And we're gonna have external parties come in and help and support and be allies. But ultimately, we can look at ourselves to be enough, and to support us, to support ourselves, and to help us grow.
Yeah, awesome gems. A lot of positivity, and I love that. But listen, we still got a long way to go. And my next question is directed to Abadesi. You know, running also similar a racial equality, justice organization, like, there's been a flood of organizations saying, right, we want to do D&I workshops. You know, we want to do this. We're finally going to do it. And with Hustle Crew, that's something that you deliver. Can you share, I guess, from delivering some of those workshops, maybe there's been any kind of common themes that you've noticed, and where kind of these employers' awareness points are getting to, and what they could be doing more? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Great question. You know, one of the things that we always focus on in our workshops are taking things which are already in our mind, like an awareness of our identity, an awareness of bias, an awareness of privilege, and just turning them into tools and frameworks. Because it's ridiculous that most people at work have never talked about race until June 2020, when our race determines our success in a career. You know what I mean? Like, studies have shown that if you replace Abadesi Osensade with, you know, Anna O'Connor, you're more likely to get an interview, right? So all of this stuff is happening, yet we're almost in denial of it. And I think some of the common themes that have come out of this are basically how invisible privilege is to people who have it, right? So one of the questions I ask in workshops is, hey, when did you realize you were your race? White people, when did you realize you were white? And all the white people will be like yesterday? And all the Black people are like, I was called the N-word when I first moved to this country, or I was called the N-word when I was at school. And I was just like, wow, so there you go. Like, we had our education when we were kids, and you're getting it now. And I think one of the things that is like extremely frustrating about this work that I do is that I become so aware of how we can spend the first decades of our life going through the world in the same way, but experiencing it so differently. And one workshop isn't enough. One workshop isn't enough to rewire our brains, but we have a sense of training that you can go into a training, and let's say a training about lean startup, and come out already ready to go and start using it. But people have an expectation that they can come into the workshop and then they're going to walk out and the world's not going to be racist anymore, or they're not going to have bias anymore. And it's not that simple. So I think one of the common themes is just this underestimation of the complexity of the problem. And I hope that as more of us vocalize this, and we keep initiatives like Black Pound Day going, and we keep community advocacy work going, the privilege that stops people from understanding the complexity of this issue and the scale and the scope of the challenge, hopefully folks will understand it a bit better. Because people are still saying like, oh, so when I come out of this workshop, I'll be better at hiring diverse people. And I'm like, you're not getting it. Like, you're still not getting it. Or people will say like, oh, you know, we want to do this workshop because we really want to help, but we don't know where to start. And I was like, you should have already started. Like, if you want to help, there's no waiting here. We've got hundreds of years of history and racism to undo. So it's positive that people are ready to invest, but I think in many ways, people still don't get it.
Wow. So I'm trying to be hopeful here. I'm like hoping that these workshops are going to work, but they're still not getting it. And it might mean we have to take things into our own hands. And I know that's something that, Annie Davis, that's something that you're working on. You know, I think during this moment, we saw a few organizations say, oh yeah, we're going to, you know, launch this fund and start investing in diverse founders. I think Glossier, they launched a fund for female founders of color. But also there was some discussions going around, like, why are we always waiting for our oppressors to give us our bailouts and give us the resources to then liberate us? And so, Andy, I know you recently actually launched a syndicate fund. Can you tell us more about that, which is going to be investing in Black founders, and why you thought it was super important to do that?
Sure, I think the why has always been the same for me, right? I never wait around for anyone to, maybe where I grew up, like Barking, I think you don't wait around for anyone to put anything in front of you. You go and get it. And history has just shown us that you can't wait for anyone, especially people who have oppressed us for many, many years, to come and give us anything, especially for free, right? So we have to go and build it ourselves. And so put together a fund that anyone can invest in, a minimum of £1,000 to invest in early stage Black founders. And the response, I think I put something out on Wednesday, which I communicated something, and then some really special people close to me helped me. And that's where advice comes in, and we learn, but put word out, and the response has been phenomenal. I think 200 people have committed to the fund, and there's, I don't know, when I last checked, it was about £1.5 million or something, like 1.5 in a day. And it's so interesting where I was talking to all these fund managers for weeks and weeks, and it was like, oh, to get to £500,000, £1 million, £2 million, it will take you 6 to 12 months to get it committed. And I was like, oh, maybe you don't know me. Maybe it's like, maybe because I want to do it, I'll do it, and I'll get it done in a month. And maybe it happened sooner than that, and there's other conversations happening. That's so that we can, I think, talking to someone earlier about this, when it comes to the investment decisions, yeah, there's systemic racism. Yes, there's like over-familiarity and all these things like pattern matching against, did they go to my college or my school, whatever it is, in my university. And then there's the cultural side of things, right? Where they just don't understand us culturally. And they're like, oh, well, this person doesn't look or feel like me. And it's just super interesting in that it's about relationship building. When we go to invest in the business, we ask ourselves, do we want to go on a journey with this person for 10 years? And if they're that different culturally, like you may feel uncomfortable to want to go out or be with this person for 10 years. And that just holds you back from making a decision. That's at the latter end of it, right? So what if we control the capital? And there's a bunch of people here doing work on that stuff as well. Then we can make decisions. We can invest in exceptional Black founders who then go on and like really show you trickle-down economics and really recycle that capital back into the community and the culture. So that's what we're doing. It fund will launch August, September. Early stage investments, 10x10.fund is the link. Go and sign up or declare some interest if you're interested. I'll put a link in here. And if anyone has any questions, let me know.
Awesome. I've also registered, but I don't have £1,000. I have but I'm working towards it. So
that's okay. That's okay.
Put in £10.
You got to start somewhere, but I want to invest in the Black community. It's super, super important. And that being said, like during this time, we also saw Black Pound Day become official, right? And so that was launched by YSYS, and a lot of, it was a time for like the Black community to buy Black owned. So switch your toothpaste to be Black owned, your plant pots, your clothes, everything. But a few people saying like, why should, isn't that racist? Like, why are you only going to shop Black? Like, why can't you shop, all? And Mohammed, I know you're through NOMI, actually, that's something that you're elevating. And can you share more, I guess, on your perspective of things and why the consumer spend within the Black communities is so important?
Sure. I think for me, like personally, the answer to that is cash flow. Like the famous saying goes, it costs money to make money. And when you look at the whole stack of like the Black business owners of the unit economics of their businesses, if you compare that to a comparable business, those unit economics are going to mean that you have to pay more to make more than your equivalent business owners. So there's a barrier already for people on multiple levels in generating cash flow. So if we look at, from a basic point of view, how most businesses start. So like most businesses are bootstrapped, small businesses, they're using either their personal finances or maybe people around them. And a lot of studies are showing that there's a huge ethnic pay gap. Black graduates make up to 17% less than their peers. And that means from a kind of like grassroots level, already there's less money to be deployed. So like you have less money to be deployed into these smaller businesses. And events like Black Pound Day helps channel more traffic to these businesses that is not free, and we're not saying they don't deserve it. It's just that the reality is when you are cash strapped and it's more difficult to raise funding, it's more difficult to get borrowing. It costs sometimes more to borrow. You don't really have the privilege of, number one, maybe having a good location. You don't have a marketing budget. You don't have like the most efficient equipment to be able to enable you to do the innovation that you want to do in the area you're working in. So even though like, obviously this inspires a lot of creativity, we shouldn't have to be creative. We should be in the equal playing field with everyone else. And I think there's other people can speak to the VC space a bit more, but what events kind of doing like Black Bounty is doing is trying to just funnel traffic to these companies that deserve it. And there's a lot of great Black businesses, like I have Afrocentrics in my hair right now, like an excellently run business. The curls are not quite like Andy yet, but soon, hopefully. And from a personal perspective, I live in Stratford, and there's a guy called Nigel who has a bike repair shop that's in the middle of the park, but kind of off the beaten track. And for a person like that, it doesn't operate on a marketing budget, but it's a great business. Like he's like a professor in bikes, and like nobody knows how he's doing, but those people need traffic, and it's just so much harder for those people to get the traffic. And that's why I think things like Black Pound Day is really important. And from the perspective of people saying it's racist, I think that's really insulting, because you're saying there isn't Black businesses good enough to deserve it. That's kind of what you're saying. You're saying, no, you shouldn't discriminate. Well, they are great Black businesses. All I'm saying is that they're hard to find and they have a disadvantage. So I'm going to support them more. And NOMI is trying to help us like become more accountable in how we're spending against other communities, and just help each other just think about that more and put more intention behind it.
Absolutely. It's so interesting, I think, what you spotlighted on the fact that when there's already some barriers right down from education and how that affects you all the way in the journey if you ever want to start a business. It's super, super important. I saw some really good questions come through actually through the chat. If you pop them into the Q&A, we will be having a Q&A session, then we can get to those questions. But I think, yeah, Mohammed, about really just highlighting and spotlighting these Black businesses is so important. And I know, Rich, actually, you've recently been featured on the Forbes list. I think the 25 Black business leaders to follow in Forbes. You were featured, and a few people on this call, Andy, Abadesi, myself were. And I guess I would love to get your perspective on why it's so important now, as we're moving within this momentum, why we should be spotlighting Black leaders, and how do we kind of really put them forward in the movements that they're creating. That was for it.
Yeah, sure. So, was featured, obviously really flattering and stuff. But I think the real MVPs generally are the businesses, that are more low key, like Mohammed mentioned, that are just trying to struggle in the background and get by. And I think, it's a responsibility of us who might have a bit more profile to, do what we can to amplify their voices. And, they're very, they're busy day in, day out trying to, get by. And I think it's so important as much as possible that we help to advertise them. When they don't have advertised budgets, it's important for us to be an advocate for them. And that's why I think, things like that Pound Day it's essential that we keep, kind of hitting the drum, we keep emphasizing it, and we don't let it slip away, because obviously it definitely is you could call it almost like a bit of a phase right now, right? And, hashtag Black Lives Matter, but what happens a month from now? What happens 3 months from now? And that's why I think it's important for those of us that are involved, recognized as business leaders, to make sure that we remember that this needs to become part of our habit. This needs to really become something that's habitual in terms of how we shop, in terms of when we're talking about businesses and recommending businesses, that is Black businesses that are on the tips of our tongue. And so I think that's kind of like part of the mindset that we have to be in.
Absolutely. And like you said, this is more than just a hashtag. Like, even with today's event, the last event, we had 1,000 people sign up, and we had half of the individuals turn up. Today we have 100 people, and we haven't done anything different with our marketing, anything different with our approach. We just tweet. That's all we do. And 100 people are here, 100 fantastic people, but the momentum is slowly fading away. Like, when it comes to, I guess, I would really love to get Annie's perspective on, I guess, how do we keep the momentum going? When it came to, the gender equality movement, hashtag #MeToo, women in tech, we've really seen a lot of progress with that, or a lot of momentum. And I'd love to get your insight as someone that super passionate about intersectionality, on how we keep that same momentum within the Black tech community as well.
Yeah, so I mean, when I think about what the reasons why the gender movement, took off, I think the reality is we've got to think about kind of who it affects, and who stands to gain from those things. And I think especially in kind of around VC at that time, they were talking a lot about the kind of the daughter effect, and how they found that VCs who had daughters were more likely to hire women, but actually it turned out to be white women, because you're still hiring in an image that you can still relate to. So I think that was an easier step, and even in general, if you look at the progress made with gender diversity, it had still been very much focused still on white women, and it hadn't really got much further than that. And trying to have discussions about intersectionality, and actually how there's compounding effects, that when you intersect Black women, if you intersect disabled women, if you intersect different trans women, they're different effects that compound, and that conversation hadn't happened. So I think the reason why it moved on so much is because it was still relatable. It was still seen as a safe movement. It was still seen as a safe expansion, because you were still keeping, it's fine then for me to say, I will invest in a friend of my daughter's or whatever, or I'll invest in someone who went to the same school as me, because I'm still keeping it within a sphere that I know, a sphere that I understand, a sphere that feels non-threatening. You know, and that to me is just the reality of it. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I've seen it with my own eyes, and you know, there's these great organizations who have really talked about improving representation of women in tech, or women on boards. But again, when you even see the makeup of their own organizations, their leadership, and then you see the makeup of their membership, even things like, you know, socioeconomic background, they might all end up having gone to the same schools, done the same MBAs, or, you know, gone to the same private schools. Like, that's still what happened. So there'd been lots of progress in that, but it was very much within a certain sphere. Now, I think what needs to happen here, or what's different here, is that we're seeing a lot more people kind of interested in having these conversations with people that are different to them. So now really starting to hear, and now really starting to listen. And it's on a level of saying, actually, I can relate because we're both human. So now I can relate on a humanity level. And I think that we as Black people have been great of being vulnerable, opening up, sharing our stories, sharing the things we've been through. And that has helped to say, okay, actually, you're also a human being. I may say these things and kind of, you know, say them off the cuff, or I might think that I'm doing something, let's say, requiring warm intros, for example. I might think that I'm doing something that's not got any kind of negative effect, that's just there to cut down, you know, my time. But I'm actually realizing that those things are actively excluding, you know, whole sections of society, because they're not networked in that, you know, in that way. They don't know me, they don't know someone who knows me. So I think that it starts with the fact that we've had these conversations, the fact that there's a realization that behaviors need to change because they've been excluding people. I think, though, the other thing that did happen with the gender movement is, because they were able to get on board with it, the next step was money going into it. The next step was, you know, LPs saying, we want to see diversity, and they were happy with gender diversity. The next thing was, you know, fund managers, angels, whatever, deciding to put money into gender diverse teams, organizations, companies that focused on products for women, all those kind of things. So again, I think that to me is the next step now. And the thing that will help to accelerate more is those decisions similarly happening, is money being specifically put behind this, and, you know, from LPs, from, you know, funds like Andy's mentioned, you know, from people investing into organizations like Hustle Crew, like YSYS, etc. And that to me is the next step. It's having financial backing to really move these things forward, and it's saying we are actually going to be putting money into making sure that, you know, that diverse founders, that Black founders and companies and organizations, you know, have money to be able to do what they need to do and to invest and to get a return. So I think that that's the next step. I see these kind of mirrors in some ways, and I think that that's kind of what needs to happen to get it to the stage where gender's at now. And I'm starting to see it happen, you know, and there's lots of conversations still going on. I've been in quite a few conversations about these kind of things, and about people trying to set things up, or trying to think about how, as LPs, they can change their, you know, investment strategies to maybe set aside portions of capital, or to like mandate that fund managers will have to invest a certain amount of money into diverse founders. Loads of these conversations are going on now, and I think there will be definitely things that come out of this. So kind of cautiously optimistic.
So we just cash, like literally we need more cash, we need real actionables. But I think also, I think you alluded to this, that there's been a lot of data around women in tech that's allowed the conversation and to allow the actions to move forward. I know, Tom, that's something that you're really keen on, or you currently are working on gathering data of, you know, the Black community, diverse groups, underrepresented groups' experiences within tech. Over the past few weeks, we've seen a few organizations get called out, like, yo, how many Black execs are on your board? Like, how many Black employees do you really have? And people are scurrying around trying to find that. Is it too late? Can they, like, how, you know, what can they do if they haven't got positive data?
Yes, so they should have had the data before, correct, right? But is it too late? No, because I think the positive energy that's happening right now actually is around trying to change that. So, and you know, I think it's rather unfortunate that the ethnicity pay gap reporting that the government had committed to under May hasn't happened. So the consultation paper of that, the consultation finished in January of last year, and it was kicked into the long grass. So the sense of post the gender pay gap reporting coming through, companies were going to be forced to collect that data, and that hasn't happened, right? So the direction of travel from that government set has been in the wrong direction. But now, as of Black Lives Matter, I think hopefully there'll be a push to get government back on track. So there was a big petition that reached over 100,000 signatures. The government responded to it. The petition commission have said that response is not good enough. You need to come back again. And you know, companies I'm talking to seem to have authentic, genuine interest in getting the data properly. So I had a conversation with the head of commercial banking for HSBC this week, and they've only just started to have those conversations and understand their own internal structures. You know, there are only 2 Black MDs in the whole organization, talking and finding out from her Black colleagues that they won't apply for a job in a team if there's no Black face there. So even the sort of sense that they won't even try for jobs, right? So that it's multi-layered and complex, the whole situation. And HSBC, and she was an impressive person, a lifer at HSBC, and somebody who did not sign up to the Rose Review, which is the Rose Review which has moved on sort of female issues, because she felt that Rose Review was tokenistic, and there were things about it that weren't actually as systemic as she would have liked. So she seems like she's going to be a strong ally, with reference to access to finance going forward. Also had a conversation yesterday with the CEO of the British Business Bank. They recognised that the data they put forward on diversity off the back of the Future Fund was somewhat lacking, and need to and want to do something better. And I think that, you know, we're going to have a deeper conversation about how to do that better. And I think a lot of these organisations just haven't had the right connections with the right organisations, pushing them in to the right place, and they just don't know them. So, you know, even having a conversation with the British Business Bank where they're building out a regional partner program and there's no real diversity connection, they don't have delivery partners to deliver that from a diversity angle. So they're starting to think about that and think, well, why don't we have that? Who are the organizations we need to speak to? How do we connect into them? And I think for me, like, this is the beginning of layering in that data and getting that sort of sense of discipline into it. And I think ultimately you can't change or genuinely impact something if you don't have the data and you don't measure it. You know, everybody in tech here, you're taught from the beginning that you need to have the data, you need to have the structure and the tests in place before you actually build something to be able to see whether it works. And that's the process we need to have going forward from here, because you need it to be able to hold companies and government to account. So without the data, everything gets stuck in anecdotal, and then it becomes, you know, a bit of like, well, that might be your experience, but other people's experience are different over here. And actually with data, you can sort of like get rid of a lot of that sort of ambiguity and move the conversation up a level. And that's what I hope to achieve with the research report we deliver, which I think actually it's already been done to some extent in the US. There was a Kaufman Fellows Institute report which showed that there was a 30% higher return to Black and ethnic minority-led businesses, which I think then allows you to then go to somebody like British Business Bank and the government and say, look here, there's a structural gap, there's a market failure. That's where government is supposed to step in to solve these failures and allow then the right amount of finance to get to these groups. And I was encouraged that I think on Wednesday, the government released their paper on innovation and R&D as part of their levelling up agenda. And there was a significant line in it which sort of said, we want to make sure that finance is available for innovators from all backgrounds, and we'll consider how access to finance can be improved for women and BAME business founders. So there's a commitment being made there, and it's now our job. We're talking about cash. It's everybody's job to hold, the people who hold the purse strings to account.
I love that. There's a real commitment we're seeing there. And some organizations have actually committed to hiring D&I leads now to carry forth that work and work with some of the organizations on this call. But I think I saw a quote somewhere once where it said, some organizations are hiring D&I leads, and this is all just impression management. They're not necessarily giving them the resource, the capital, the influence to make change. And I'd really love to get Abadesi's thoughts on how can we ensure that these organizations that are hiring D&I leads are setting up that talent for success to make change?
Yeah, this is a fantastic question. I don't know if anyone saw the Time magazine article about diversity in the workplace last year, but Google spent $114 million on diversity programs in 2014, only to see total representation of Black employees drop in the subsequent years. So yes, you can invest in diversity initiatives, but the majority of them are going to fail. And you can hire a diversity and inclusion leader, but just like you say, Deborah, if they don't set them up for success, they are going to fail. So most companies don't even know what success on this front looks like. And I think that's incredibly troubling. Like, you need to think of equality just like any other product. And it needs a roadmap, and it needs milestones, and it needs success metrics, and it needs resources. I'm actually a big believer in the fact that, diversity almost should be coupled in with everything else, whether it's product, whether it's marketing, whether it's community. This person should be a CXO that has the same power as other executives on the team. And I think it has to be a role where everyone in the organization understands its value and understands their accountability to its success. I think a lot of tech companies that are about to start hiring diversity leaders are going to see Black and other marginalized employees very excited, and a bunch of straight white men and even straight white women a bit maybe miffed or bored by this, right? And I think that's just extremely frustrating. Like, if you're building a marketing strategy, it has to have diversity at its core, or it will fail. If you're building a growth strategy, investment strategy, financial strategy, legal strategy, community strategy, product design strategy, any strategy in your business that is not optimizing for inclusion will fail. That's what we learned in June. So I think the way that you set them up for success, look, every company is unique. Everyone's got their own goals, but you have to ask yourself, are you creating the space for this role to change incentives in the company? Because that is where the change will come from. If people who are already in your culture, who are very bad actors, I'm talking people who have had complaints made about them by women, by Black people, by disabled people, if this role won't have any power to curb that behavior, or even better, manage them out of the company, nothing will change. Culture is a composite output of individual thoughts, words, and actions. So you need to let this person have power over individuals and thoughts and actions in your organization. Otherwise, how will they weed out the toxicity? And how will they nudge you in this direction of equality, right? Because every day we go back to reality, we're facing institutionalized racism, we're facing institutionalized ableism, we're facing all the isms all the time. Algorithms have the isms now, like, we can't escape it. So I think organizations have to understand incentives have to change if culture is going to change. So let that person change incentives.
I feel like now's a good time to remind everyone of the hashtag Black Tech Communities, because there were some fire gems that I want to be tweeted out, put on Instagram. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And, we've seen a few organizations before getting to that point are hosting roundtables, hosting focus groups, really trying to unpack that and explore. And I know, Rich, actually, you encouraged your investors to also begin that journey and begin to have those roundtables and focus groups. Could you share more about, I guess, the efforts that it took for you to encourage them to do that, and what were some of their learnings, if it's an open space to share?
Yeah, for sure. Yes, I think firstly, and obviously this is a safe space, and I think especially when it comes from like the investment world, there's been a lot of, I think, symbolic action in terms of tweets and in terms of like statements. But when it comes to actually writing checks or like hiring Black people into funds, it's being piss poor, you know, to be frank, it's being dead. And so I think there's still a hell of a lot of work to be done. And I think it's why it's super important that we continue to press and we continue to ask the question. And I think one step even better, you know, we launch our own funds, just like what Andy's doing. And so I think, you know, where we can be part of the next stage in terms of actually setting up our own things, I think we need to like jump behind that. But yeah, I think, you know, very specifically when it comes to like Black businesses or Black startups that are looking for funding, it is really tough. And I mean, like, you know, there was a report done last year by Atomico, which is one of the leading venture capital firms who backed companies like Skype and Klarna. You know, they reported that in Europe, you know, over 3/4 of Black founders experience racism when they're trying to go out and fundraise. And so there's definitely problems there. But I think the challenge we're coming up against is the fact that many of these, particularly in the VC space, they haven't had these conversations before. They're totally unaware of the fact that race is a thing. They're totally unaware of the experiences that Black and people of other like ethnic backgrounds face when they're trying to engage in a culture that's not necessarily, you know, our own, and trying to engage with them to get them to fund our companies. And so I think it's definitely a long way to go. I think the conversation is just starting to be had, but a lot of work needs to happen in those spaces. And it's not easy. It's very difficult. And I think we've got to be very mindful that this is definitely a long-term journey and something that we have to like keep the pressure up on.
It sometimes a little bit upsets me that we have to encourage the people that have been excluding us for so long to finally wake up and see. But I know that from what's happened, a lot of change is going to happen, and I'm excited about the future. Like, I've already got my Black Ballad membership. I'm buying Black owned. I don't use patch plants anymore. I use this a company called House of Cato. It's owned by a young Black girl. So I've got my new plants in my room. I'm really excited, and I'm ready for Nomi to come out, and I'm going to be tracking where all my spend is going. So I just love like everyone on the call to share maybe 2 actions as a Black community, as our allies. Like, what can we do to really keep the momentum going? And then after that, we'll move into the Q&A. Mohammed, if you want to start first.
You're on mute.
You're on mute.
He's going.
Oh, sorry, guys. Yeah, I think what something that's really important is just to continue to control the narrative, because ultimately, like, the narratives are powerful, and so is kind of like narratives you build about how you're spending and just like the economic empowerment within our communities. For example, something that's really annoyed me is how over kind of the last few weeks, the government's kind of been positioning like the furlough scheme like some sort of gift that we should all be happy for. But like, the reality is that, you know, we paid for that. It's our money through VAT, through our salary, income tax, through the value we add to companies and the corporation tax. So it's important not to forget that and like reshape the narrative around our finances. And I think what Nomi is trying to do is try to enable people to take more control of that, and just continue with the momentum of keeping more money in the community, and also just growing these businesses in a way that supports the future growth of the economic power of Black people in general. But yeah, just control that narrative, and just from a kind of a bottom up way, and continue pushing the agenda and the narrative that we want to push.
Anyone can take the floor.
Sorry?
Anyone can take the floor, but if not, Tom?
Yeah, so what I'd say, I mean, the biggest and most important thing is about basically generating this sense of community. So I think, you know, I started Meetel in 2008, you know, rolling power cuts in Shoreditch. No Silicon Roundabout didn't exist as a thing. There were very few startups. There was no infrastructure. There was no real VC community, because historically we didn't make the successes in the internet boom that the US did. So all of that talent went into private equity. So we ended up with a bunch of people who are very financial banking oriented. They weren't operators, they didn't understand startups, they didn't understand what you needed, etc. So it was a very difficult environment back then. And you roll forward now to 2020, 12 years later, it's a world away, and it's very similar to Silicon Valley, and it feels like we've got unicorns aplenty. None of those big companies back then succeeded, and it feels to me like this Black community of emergent, exciting tech startups is where the world of tech was 10 years ago, 2010. The female community is where tech was 5 years ago, right? So now is a really important moment where we're in a terrible economic situation. Like, everybody's got to help each other out. Everybody's got to start to learn to open their black books, their networks. Networks are so important, and I think there's been a tendency, because it's the oppressed tendency of divide and conquer, and it's sort of like, oh, I can't help you because if I help you, then you might get money that won't come my way, and it's been like fighting over a tiny pot. Whereas now is the moment where there's a lot of genuine, like, exciting businesses and exciting great organizations like YSYS to help and support. That the networking effect needs to start to come through, and in the same way, I'm a founder who's been out the other side. I need to come and help the next bunch who are coming through, and we need to create that virtuous circle. So the key for me is like network, collaboration, awareness, everybody helping each other out. It's like that is what's going to basically ensure the success of this cohort and this community.
Nice. And Tom actually inspired me as he was talking. I think one thing I would love to urge us folks to do is to check our internalized oppression. I think for me, coming out the back of June, I realized that a lot of my self-doubt, my imposter syndrome, my insecurities just come from living in a world that is white supremacist and operating in a space which is actively anti-Black sometimes, if not a lot of the time. I'm talking about tech, talking about entrepreneurship, talking about VC. So it's been incredibly powerful for me to actually start to recognize that this unapologeticness that has come from the understanding of institutionalized racism and just the collective action of Black people should happen every day, all the time in my mind. I should feel as emboldened to be honest and take risks today, tomorrow, and forever as I felt throughout all of June. So that's what I want to remind all the Black people listening. Internalized oppression is real. There's some amazing TED Talks about it online. Let's keep ours in check. And this goes for everyone who's marginalized. I saw my man Suleiman Khan in the mix as well, and we have been talking about this a lot. So let's keep our internalized oppression in check. The other thing I want to say is, I honestly don't want to hear any more white people saying, I want to help, but I don't know where to start. If you want to help, you don't need to know where to start. How many of y'all learned how to bake sourdough in lockdown? I'm sure you didn't know how to do that before lockdown started, but you learned, okay? You want to learn how to be an advocate of social justice? Get on a search engine and find out. And the other thing I want to say is, the people with the most power to change the world are people with the most privilege right now, okay? So if you're white, if you're straight, if you're rich, you got power, and you need to go use that power to talk to other people with that power. I honestly don't need any more white people to help me. I don't need a mentor. I don't need a white mentor, but I would love white people to go talk to other white people, because that's when I know you're serious. I know it's hard. I know it's uncomfortable, but you want to help us? Embrace the discomfort. And if you're not feeling uncomfortable, you're probably not helping us. So that's my last little soundbite.
Who's following that?
That's amazing. Yeah, absolutely. That was, yep, you said it. So that was going to be my point, but you said it amazingly. I suppose that my point to kind of what can or what should Black people be doing then? I think, one, let's recognize that there's a momentum right now, and we want it to last, and we're hoping it lasts. Either way, let's use this momentum. This is the time to take advantage of those opportunities that are here now. This is the time to do these things, because this is where, at this moment in time, when there's still people willing to listen, still people willing to help, still people putting money behind it. At the end of the day, I think doing this now, whatever happens in the future, we at least set ourselves up now with what we can now. And start building things right now. because who knows what's going to be happening next year. Who knows in 2 years' time what people are going to do. But if we've started to set these things up now, if the data projects are going now, if the funds are going now, we're building that ecosystem up right now, and that's going to help it kind of propel itself. We're building up all that resource now that we can hopefully take forward later, with or without the level of outside help that we have now. So I think that's one thing. And I think too, similarly, to kind of what was just said, but even for us, I think we have to all recognize the places that we, do have privileges. So if we have access to people, if we have the ear of important people or senior people or people who have, influence, if we ourselves are in positions where, like I know that I've got to the stage now in my career where I feel very comfortable telling a lot of people how it is in VC. I mean, I have, lots of funds that I look after and I'm the LP. So ultimately I feel comfortable telling them, and kind of pointing out to them where I think where there can be improvement, and that's what I know I can do. And I think for many of us, although in some situations we might feel, kind of very helpless, or that we don't have this, we all have a sphere of influence in some way. And I think we just need to know what that is and use that. And for some of us, it could be, as I said, some very senior, with others it might not be, but whatever it is we have, we should absolutely be using it to be pushing people at this time, and to be pushing change, and to be steering it in the direction. This is the time to be bold, basically. I think it's not the time to, I think we've had the uncomfortable conversations, we've made ourselves vulnerable, we've had the awkwardness. If we can do that, we can absolutely stop, pushing further now. We can absolutely start, now asking for what we want to see. Because we've done, the hardest step was this first level of like looking at each other like, should I tell you this? Should I not tell you this? Is it going to be awkward if I expose the things I've gone through? We've done that. So let's now be bold and carry on pushing.
It's like everyone has all their quotes written. Like, I'm loving this. Now is the time to be bold. Like, let's put that in a frame. If we go to, I think, Rich and Andy, and then we're going to go straight into Q&A. Is this the awkward guy thing? Like,
yeah, I think just to echo what's been said, I think what's so important is to remember that every single one of us has a role to play, and not to forget that, you might be somebody, who's on panels, you might be, somebody who's in a workplace. I think every single one of us has a role to play. Same way when Black Lives Matter was happening, some people, their role is to go and be protesting, and that's been a front line, and that's okay. And I think it's really important for us to remember that in this moment that we have, as Black people, we each need to contribute. And, I think for a lot of us at home, buy from Black businesses. Like, I have to plug two that I love. One's Sunmo, who makes amazing plantain chips. So, or Chris, go and get them, it's really tasty. Another one's Herbie, which basically does like really like tasty kind of herbal drinks mix. And so we have a role to play here, and it's quite simple. And I think for those of us that are in position of privilege, like Anu said, we need to pay it forward. And I think what you may be surprised by is that, generally speaking, we're pretty open. And I think if you are sitting there thinking about, I need sponsorship from a Black person's organization, reach out to them. Do not feel any two ways about it. They have an obligation to help you and to help drive forward your career. And I think my last point is, if you are around this weekend, check out the Great Feast of London. It's an amazing event that's happening with loads of food, loads of music, and other virtual experiences set up by a great Black entrepreneur called BJ. And so I think wherever we can and whatever we're doing, we just got to remember that it starts with us. And no matter how small the action we take, it's contributing to the bigger goal of moving things forward collectively.
Someone said you're doing QVC.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, we need to set that up. Someone set that up. Yeah, and Andy will do Andy will do your angel round. Let's make it happen.
So I think okay, everything everyone said. So I think a few things. One, I didn't know what sour good was. I had to Google it, and it doesn't taste nice. But anyway, sure, Abidesi, shout out, sour good gang. Two, or one really. After this call today, a few of my friends are here. We're meeting up and we're doing our quarterly goals meeting. So, and that's just a few of us getting together and discussing our goals for the quarter. If you don't do stuff like that already, get together with a few people, either like who you're close with, who you trust, who are in your sector, who are working on a similar startup or at some similar stage in their journey, and just do quarterly or even monthly if you want, meetings and hold each other accountable as Black people. Be there to support each other. It's really important. And just be consistent. That's really important, right? And so I definitely recommend that. Create a WhatsApp group. It takes 2-3 seconds. Find 2-3 people, get together, do the first one this weekend, jump on a call. Everyone takes 15 minutes each. You go around. I'll even share with you a spreadsheet, a goal spreadsheet. You can just copy the template and just run it. That's 1. 2. Yeah, I think Deborah mentioned at the beginning that a few of us wrote some Forbes article this week, and that's good. And recognition is important, and everyone works hard. Everyone on this call actually does the work. My point is, as great as all that stuff is, right, and it's recognition, it's great. The vanity and all that stuff doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is doing the work, right? Like, I don't care anything. All I care is to do the work, and the work will always bring the results. History belongs to doers. It always has and always will. Just do the work. Having names in places, faces in places, recognition for us as a people is important, yes, but it will come as a result of the work. The result is the only thing that matters. So just drive from every single second of every single day to do that work, and the results will change, and us, our position and where we are in the world as a people will change as well.
100%, literally. We are making history here, and I'm so excited about the future. I think just another point, as we move into Q&A, there's a few questions that I've pulled out, but panelists, if there are any questions that you want to answer, please do go ahead. I'm going to quickly share the link for YSYS Advocates. If you haven't already joined, please do join. Let's keep the momentum going. Let's be part of the conversation. Let's make history together. So one of the questions that really stood out was someone submitted a question saying they had spoken to their HR about wanting to see the organization like make their stand regarding the Black Lives Matter movement, and they haven't heard anything from them. What would be your advice to an individual that's in a space like that where nothing's being done?
I think it's so hard. I've had so many conversations from my community about this, and I think it's again a reminder how, you know, privilege is invisible to those who have it, and we are going into workplaces where there are no Black people in leadership and there are no Black people in HR, and we're trying to explain our version of events, our version of reality, and they just don't get it. They don't see the world this way. They don't see those things, and as soon as the hashtag stops trending, they forget that these things existed. So I think the first thing I want to say to the person who asked this is like, I know that it's hard, and I feel for you, and I empathize with you, and also this isn't your work, right? Like if HR were doing their job properly, if your line manager were doing their job properly, they would be prioritizing your well-being, because we all know that if we don't feel like we belong, if we don't feel like we're being looked after, we cannot be productive. We can't excel in our roles. So the first thing to acknowledge is that you're being failed by your employer. You are. And, it's not on you to try and correct that problem. However, if you want to take on this burden of righting their wrong, then I think the best way for you to start is to think of who has the incentive to prioritize your attention and who has the incentive to support you. And, it probably is your line manager, the best person to start with, and just kind of say, hey, listen, I need to hit these goals and these targets, but guess what? I cannot do that in the backdrop of a culture that's not optimizing for inclusion, in the backdrop of a company that's not engaging with this subject. This is taking up headspace that's preventing me from the task you've hired me to do. So you want to set me up to succeed in my role, y'all better start taking on some of this work too. I think that would be the first thing I would say. And then the second thing I would say is like plan for the long term, and plan to, in the long term, move somewhere where this is on the agenda and this is a priority, because that's the sacrifice we have to make, and that's the risk that we have to take. But I honestly think we can't be nurtured and we can't reach our potential if we're not in a company culture that's not prioritizing this work.
100%. I guess another question I think is super important is, how do we ensure within this movement that we are including multiple intersections? So whether that's Black trans, Black disabled individuals, how do we ensure that they're included in the conversation, and we're not just, I guess, creating maybe initiatives or products that are for them, but we're doing it together as a unit?
I think that's a really great question. I know, you know, we've talked a lot, Deborah, about kind of intersection, and we've talked also about things like, you know, making sure that, number one, like women get brought along in this, because sometimes you can see very visible, you know, kind of black men, but not necessarily black women. And absolutely, I've talked in lots of talks I've done more generally, absolutely talked about intersection and deliberately mentioned people with disabilities. I think it's super important to bring everybody along on that. And I think what we as Black, we have to be aware that, you know, we live under the same structures as everybody else, and a lot of the behaviors that are done, you know, more generally in society, that absolutely we have to hold our hands up and say that we do repeat some of those things ourselves. Like, there's just no two ways about it. That's what part of living in a system does. You know, the system runs itself, and you still duplicate some of those behaviors. So it is just really an intentional bringing along. That's all you can do. You have to have a very intentional bringing along. And I've had conversations with people where I've pointed out, you know, that they're talking about kind of, you know, social background, and saying that I've been in rooms where, like, all the minorities are all went to private school, or all definitely had a degree, or all, you know, have an MBA or whatever, and I don't see wide representation. And I have heard people say, well, let's just get Black people in and we can worry about that later. I think that is the wrong thing to do, because we just end up then with a structure that replicates what we see and what we've seen, you know, in kind of white organizations, where it's the, you know, straight, able-bodied white men that are at the top of the leadership stack, and then everybody else is kind of scrambling. So we have to be super aware of the fact that, you know, we absolutely have a lot of the same, you know, unconscious biases that are part of society. We need to just be super aware of it and be very intentionally bringing other groups in. And so in the places where we're having these discussions, in the round tables, in the, you know, let's get together and have a talk about what we think we should do, we need to just be actively aware of bringing people in, especially, absolutely right, this question, if we're talking about things that will affect, you know, disabled people, and we're saying we're creating these companies, or we're creating these initiatives, but we've not brought any of them in the room to discuss it, that is absolutely wrong. So we just need to be super aware and reach out, and it's our responsibility, in the same way that we're saying, you know, that why should the work be on us as Black people to educate others about what we're going through. We should not be relying on them to do the emotional labor. We need to be proactively reaching out and make sure that we've got a wide representation of Black people, you know, in these conversations.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. And I guess the other question is, even like same momentum, like how do we include more intersections, more groups, but also how do we take this movement, I guess, in London national? Like, you know, I think the BLM movement, especially within tech, has been London focused, and I guess, has anyone got any sharings on how we can reach Manchester, Birmingham, Leeds, or groups are doing the great work out there already as well?
I just, again, come in, because I live in Sheffield, and I don't think people realise that I'm not from London. I've never lived in London. I've always, for all my time, both in a fund for 4.5 years and now as an LP, I've never lived in London. I travel down a lot, obviously, because everything's here, but all my stuff is up here. And it really is quite a kind of passion of mine, but also it can be quite annoying and almost upsetting that everything is very London focused, and that, you know, the experience of Black people outside of London is very different. My experience, I'm sure, will be very different to all of you. You know, like, I'm lucky that because I'm Nigerian, we had a very kind of close relationship to the Nigerian community through those who came over here in my parents' generation. And we were able to, like, link up, you know, with them nationally. But in terms of my day-to-day growing up, it wasn't, I just didn't have that community. It was very much kind of me and, you know, the only Black person in my school, the only Black person in my job, the only Black person in my church, like all those things, it's only me. So I think it's really important to understand the challenges. So the lack of access to finance, for example, the lack of access to community and networking groups in person, you know, and the lack of just role models, you know, and seeing Black role models. just because there's just not that many of us, and we're not organised in the way that it's a lot easier to organise in London, where you just see so many people. So I think that it's really important for and this to me is exactly a very similar answer to what I gave before. You know, when we are doing things and having conversations, let's think about, okay, are we making this very London centric? Are we leaving out groups of people? Are we assuming that everybody has the same experience, or are we actively reaching out? And you know, there are groups. It's very fragmented, obviously, because it's not, you know, Manchester and Sheffield, it's not going to be the same group. There's going to be two different, you know, groups of founder groups and things like that, of people kind of having networking, but that they are out there. And I think what's been good about lockdown is that it's meant that so I'm part of this Facebook group called Black Owned Economy, which is went from 0 to 100,000 members in 2 weeks, and they're all like selling their products and sharing the things they do. And that's been great because it's democratized this. It means that I found someone who does homemade hair products in Sheffield, and she literally delivered it to my house, and people are able to do it. So I think it's let's think of ways that we can really capture everything, so we don't end up with seeing, you know, well, actually Black people in London have been very empowered and have made great strides and things are doing well, and we're focused on them for policy, and we're focused on them for where the capital goes to. But then we end up with this other group of Black people that are just completely left behind and haven't got that same access to all these things. So I think it's, as I said, it's bringing in people to that conversation. It's going out actively and looking for those groups. If anyone, I'll share some that I know of in the comments and stuff. But it's also making sure that, you know, if you can find ways to do things that is not location specific, you know, so obviously a lot of these online things can end up being really good because anyone can join from anywhere. I think it's a good idea. Some people are saying, yeah, Wales, there's loads of places in the UK, you know, there's lots of places outside of London, so we need to make sure we're representing them.
Awesome. It sometimes upsets me so much that we take this Noah Ark approach to, I guess, inclusion, but I'm so happy that there's individuals like ourselves that really are thinking about it from an intersectional lens, and hopefully we can achieve equality for everyone that's facing struggles. So we have just about 6 minutes left. So if there are any questions that you want to answer, please go ahead. If not, I will continue to choose a few. No? Okay, I'm going to go ahead. So one question I thought was super important is just how do you maintain your well-being during this time? Like, you know, we had a really intense 4 weeks, and now a lot of people are doing the labor in this work. And I guess this is an open question. How are you guys maintaining your well-being, and any tips and advice for others?
I think I've started, I have a 7-minute diary. My best friends got it for me. But you have to do it as soon as you wake up and before you go to bed. And it's very basic, but it just asks you things like, what are you grateful for today? What's your positive affirmation or your prayer for the day? And then at the end of the day, it asks you to reflect, like, what's a good deed that you've done today? And I think when we have an onslaught of negativity or being overwhelmed by challenges that we individually can't help or resolve, it's very nice to have that moment to kind of ground ourselves and remind ourselves that there are actually parts of our world which we can make an impact in every day. And sometimes they're really small things. Like sometimes I'll just write, I cooked dinner for my husband, but it makes me feel good. So yeah, I think just taking note and stock of the little things that we do and the little things that we achieve, certainly in my case, that's helped me.
Does anyone else want to share? No?
Just find time to do what you enjoy, right? Like every day, if you go to YouTube and you put in Gohan versus Cell, Dragon Ball Z, there's like 2 million plus views. I solely account for like 100,000 of those views, right? Like just go and do stuff you enjoy doing. I go and watch Dragon Ball all the time, Gohan versus Cell. I watch a lot of football. I watch when basketball's on, I watch a lot of basketball. I've got a little ball I kick around my house for no reason. Like just go and enjoy the stuff. Like find your escapes and go and do them, right? And it's so interesting all this stuff. I find that like there's all this talk about this work-life balance stuff, and I actually think that's the wrong term for all these things. I think it's like a question of doing what you love versus what you don't, right? And finding the balance there. And if you spend a lot of time in things you don't enjoy as much or love, then you have to you have to like balance yourself out and find time for the things that you do love. Yeah, so just go and do stuff you enjoy doing. Find your escapes, whatever that is. That can be go for a walk, that can be whatever. I just watch Dragon Ball really, and talk to Black people, hey Black people.
Cool. Let's end on that note. Everyone go and watch Dragon Ball Z. And so we have a few minutes left, and we're going to use this moment to, I guess, listen to some of Lindani's music. Thank you to our incredible panelists and our Lindani for sharing some amazing, beautiful words. Virtual round of applause. I want to see some fire emojis and claps. You feel free to drop out now or stay with us. I'm going to put myself on mute and listen to some amazing words. Oh, I won't put myself on mute because I'm going to play the music.
See, I have a dream to witness Africans free themselves from mental bondage. Limitations so foreign to our DNA, our presence has been felt from the ancient of days. We set trends, scientific inventions, and made way for the rest of the world to learn. You see, our ancestors soiled toil for centuries, and outdated history for those who would repeat it if need be. A crucifixion that left the continent barren and resourceful. Many hands were left empty whilst a few had their bellies full. Blessed is the mind that withstands pain, because pain is the seed that grows into tomorrow's gains. You see, I have a dream. A dream to be aware of the moment through the seed of life that breathes beyond the captive. A dream to understand that spirituality is deeper than the lies told and the facts of men through religion. See, I have a dream. Great strength built from centuries of rejection, true affection. From dead skyscrapers are designed to be the center of attraction. Without a doubt, our blood and tears shall not go to waste. For they shall be the base for a higher place, a place destined for genius souls where it's not about race but God's grace. You see, I have a dream to have my eyes open to see that evil has reigned before my forefathers, nothing is new. For this reason, I dream to comprehend the need to take total responsibility of my well-being and understand that prayers without improved growth is not a strategy. You see, I have a dream. So-called godly precedents, the devil became truth behind the actions of men. So the real enemy is spiritual, dwelling in the human's physical. Systems designed to eradicate self-consciousness, the deepest form of human intelligence. Parents left ignorant so they could never give us what's relevant. Confusing mediocre for excellence. I can imagine how many Black folks actually said Obama could never be a president. And even with that said, we let ourselves be the victims of drought in the middle of an ocean bed. I have a dream and the thoughts of 1,000 ideas. Dreams longer than the walk of Mansa but shorter than life. Dreams bigger than living in glass houses or living expensive. Dreams deeper than the titleship, but as shallow as the need of youth empowerment. You see, I have a dream to see the day getting a doctorate becomes a true search for African development. And not a license to abuse power and degrade that of our own. I have a dream to see African education being reevaluated to meet the needs of the young minds and the African juniors. I have a dream for the eyes of every youth to raise the standard to which they are treated. I have a dream and an intention. The intention is to motivate and elevate, create that which is already residing in the creativity we were made. See, now it's time to plant seeds for an unforeseen generation. A generation inspired by so-called impossibilities. A generation that believes that most things called impossible are just fantasies. We are the generation with the genius to recognize pain and strength. An unbroken generation aware of a journey and unshaken by its struggle. We all have a journey.
That's it. Absolutely beautiful. Thank you, everyone, again. This will be recorded, so you can head over to our YouTube channel probably next week and it'll be up. Do share it with your friends, take notes, and more importantly, apply everything that you've learned on this session. Bye.
See you, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Good weekend.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great
Bye,
weekend.
everyone.